So good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon to some and good evening to others. Thank you, everybody. I'm Donna Edwards, wife of Governor John Bell Edwards, and I have the honor of serving as First Lady of the great state of Louisiana. So I get the honor of going over a few housekeeping rules with you all before we get started. First of all, if you would please mute yourself before when you're not speaking. And so today, only the panelists are going to be on the viewing screen. So participants, which you heard earlier, we have over 400 participants are going to not be visible and will be unable to speak, but they can use the chat box. The chat box is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you can chat with an individual, with a panelist, or with everyone. Also, we're going to run a slideshow in conjunction with the program to view the screens in equal proportion. So if you're, I would think by now many of you or all of you are familiar with Zoom, but just in case you're not, if you'll hover your cursor over to the middle, you'll see the PowerPoint on one side and you'll see faces on the other. There's a few things you can do. You can move the cursor back and forth to make the PowerPoint bigger or make the faces bigger. At the very top where it says view, you can also view gallery instead of the pinned person. So it gives you some options on what you feel comfortable with. So you can add any questions you may have into the chat box, and we're going to answer them at the end. However, we may run out of time, and if we do, we're going to make sure someone emails you with the answer. So I'm very excited today to also announce that this summit is approved by the NASW, which is the National Association of Social Workers for the Louisiana chapter, for 2 contact hours of continuing education credit, CEUs. Pretty excited about that. And there's going to be a link and a form in the chat, so please fill it out to receive your certificate after participation in the event. There'll also be an evaluation sent to you as well, so please support our efforts by giving us some feedback. That always helps. And so with that being said, we're waiting on, I know it's just 3 minutes in, but I know we have a few more people coming in. So right now we had 400, like I mentioned, sign up, and Kayla is behind the scenes working very hardly to try to get everybody on board. But while she's letting everyone in, I will tell you that this will be available later on. So you'll be able to see it in its entirety, as it'll be posted on the website. So this is our 3rd virtual Global Human Sex Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Summit. And so once again, welcome to all our participants as they start joining us. We're thrilled to have lots of new attendees this time. Today's participants are literally all from all over the country and the globe. So in addition to the first spouses, our participants range from CASA and CAC volunteers and workers, state administrators, state and federal level law enforcement, DCFS workers, counselors, and nonprofit partners. And we have 25 states with us today, and participants from Rome and Australia, and a few other countries I heard earlier. So I'd like to recognize some of our first spouses that are joining us today. They may not be on at this very moment, but they will be joining us throughout the seminar today. So we have First Lady Marty Kemp of Georgia, and she is she on right now?
Morning, I'm here. Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Good morning. This is going to give you a few minutes. Would you like to?
Oh, sure. Good morning. I'm so glad to be with y'all today and very excited to hear and listen, learn and listen. We're doing a lot of things over here in Georgia. We passed great legislation, formed the Grace Commission back in 2019, bring all the experts to the table so we could learn everything that we possibly can to try to fight this terrible industry. So I'm just very excited to be here, and please know that Georgia is ready to help and work together and partner together and do anything we can to fight this, get rid of this evil industry. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate your words, First Lady Kemp. Also, we have First Lady Susan Hutchinson of Arkansas. She'll give us a few minutes so you can introduce herself.
Yes, thank
Susan.
you. It's good to see y'all. And I'm so grateful to Donna Edwards for doing this summit and focusing on sex trafficking. It is a phenomenon and very much out of sight. And I've been pushing on children's advocacy centers here in Arkansas to expand those. And we just had a law passed that makes us more relevant and makes us working more directly with the state, not just for whatever funding they might give us, but in our operations. And we're very excited about that. And we've expanded in these 6 years I've been here so that we can serve all 75 counties with our 27 different locations that we now have. Very, very excited about that and what we might be able to do. And of course, we're looking at what Arkansas is doing currently on sex trafficking. I'll be looking to see what more we might be able to do. So I'm excited to get more information today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, First Lady Hutchinson. I appreciate all your work with CACs also. I've learned a lot from you. I also want to introduce First Lady Janet Holcomb from Indiana. Is she on? Okay, she may be joining us. And I saw the screen said First Lady Cecilia Abbott of Texas. I think she may be joining us later. And of course, thank you. First Lady Yumi Hogan of Maryland, and who we're going to hear from shortly. So I'm very grateful to have worked with many first spouses on this initiative, and I thank them for attending today and their commitment to ending human trafficking. We're also grateful to have Marilyn. I mentioned this First Lady Hogan, an expert from the field, to partner with us on this summit today. Ending human trafficking is something that John Bell and I are very passionate about, and I'm so proud of his continued leadership in working towards putting an end to trafficking, helping to restore the lives of the survivors and convicting the perpetrators. So these summits are important in so many ways. Having partners share information and best practices is critical, but most importantly, these summits connect those of us committed to eradicating human trafficking. So creating awareness about this tragedy and learning from the experts about how to stop it really provides us with tools to eradicate this crime and provide paths to recovery for the survivors. So sharing information, working together strengthens, of course, the fight within our own states, across our country, and now throughout the world. We have heard from many of you across the country after each of the previous summits, and I'm asking for even more information. So we plan to continue these summits as long as there is interest. There's one more summit this year that's going to be planned for October. So if you're on this Zoom, then you are on our email list and you will continue to receive information. But at some point in the future, we really hope to convene in person, and we know there's going to be a lot more information to share when we're in person and can, work together hand in hand. And so we're looking forward to that day. But, I will say that this Zoom has allowed us to reach, obviously, across borders, across states, time zones. And so it's been very beneficial to be able to have this opportunity. So I know everyone is ready to get started. First Lady Hogan and her staff have assembled an incredible lineup today to inform you of the work they are doing in Maryland. Once again, the idea is for us to share best practices and learn from one another. It is through the sharing and learning from one another that we will become wise in the ways necessary to combat human sex trafficking in our states and around the globe. So thank you again, and please join me in welcoming Reverend Dr. Andrew T. Court to start off with a word of prayer. Reverend Court is co-pastor of First Presbyterian Church, Annapolis, and has more than 16 years of full-time ministry experience. So we're honored to have him with us. He served as senior pastor for the First Presbyterian Church of Bloomington, Indiana. He's been in Pittsburgh, New Jersey, and in New York. So we're honored to have you with us this morning, Reverend Court, and thank you for being with us. And so I'm going to turn it over to you now with a word of prayer.
Thank you so much, and a word of grace and peace to you on behalf of the congregation here at First Presbyterian Church in Annapolis, Maryland. And it's a joy. It's also an honor to be invited to share in this good work with all of you. So I'm not 100% certain of everybody's faith tradition on this call, and I want to honor and respect that. But as we turn now to a moment of prayer, I invite all of you to join me if that's something that's comfortable for you in prayer. So let us pray. O God, out of chaos and in the presence of a deep, dark void, you created this world. You made the sun to shine on all, the moon and the stars at night, the waters of the sky, the animals that crawl, birds that fly, and fish that swim. And then in the fullness of time, you created us in your divine image so that we might reflect your love to the world, and you called us good. So we thank you and we trust in you, and now we turn to you once more, asking that you might hear our prayer on behalf of all of those who are and who have been held captive in tragic situations. We give thanks for each person here today. We give thanks for the work of First Lady Hogan and First Lady Edwards, and all of them this day and every day, who seek to follow your will as they serve their communities. Continue to encourage and inspire each one, all of us, so that we might bear much good fruit. And while most of us on this call today will never experience the kind of extreme poverty that millions of people live with every day, forcing them to face the unimaginable, help us to be understanding and compassionate towards their needs. Help us to love them in the way that you love them. Give us the will to make things better. And God, just as you helped Moses and Aaron as they spoke boldly to Pharaoh on behalf of the slaves in Egypt, help us to speak up for modern day slaves around the world. We pray that through our actions, we can help play a part to bring an end to human trafficking. For you are a strong tower and a mighty fortress. We pray that you would help your rescued children feel safe and begin to heal. Protect them from others who seek to harm them. Provide a blanket of safety, security, and shalom, and hold them close as a mother hen gathers her brood. Grant your healing touch and new life and hope wherever there are old hurts and wounds. God, we know that you can bring new joy and hope where previously there was only shame and fear. We ask this for our brothers and sisters who desperately need to accept that they can be made new. You demand justice for your children who have been wronged. Give us strength to people who investigate and prosecute traffickers. Encourage them when they are weary, and give courage to survivors when they are asked to testify against their former captors. For you are a God of liberation, seeking to set all of your people free from bondage and oppression. You have led your people through the Red Sea. You have walked with them through dark and shadowy valleys. You have promised to never leave or abandon us. So continue to be with those impacted by human trafficking. And God, you have called us to be your hands, your feet, your voice in this world, relentlessly working for the wholeness, peace, and liberation of all of your children, so that each one may know and experience the joy of abundant life in you. This day and always we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. What a beautiful prayer. And thank you for recognizing sex trafficking as a modern day form of slavery. So I appreciate that. So at this time, I'd like to introduce First Lady Hogan. First Lady Hogan is the first Korean American First Lady of the United States and the first Asian American First Lady of Maryland. She is an accomplished artist and an adjunct professor at Maryland Institute College of Art. As First Lady, Hogan has made it a priority to share her love of art with young people through the Yumi Cares Children's Art for Recovery, Empowerment, and Strength, love that, Foundation, a nonprofit that offers art therapy programs to patients aged 21 and under. First Lady Hogan has also made tremendous efforts to unify diverse communities in Maryland, including victims of domestic violence and human trafficking, veterans, first responders, and Marylanders experiencing hunger and poverty. First Lady Hogan, thank you so much for offering to do and participate and really present today and at this summit. And I'm going to turn things over to you.
Thank you, First Lady Donna Edwards, for your kind introduction. Thank you, Pastor Colt, for your prayer. Actually, he's my pastor. Good morning, everyone. I'm Yumi Hogan, the First Lady of Maryland. It is my honor to be here with all of you for the very important mission of ending human trafficking. First of all, I would like to thank First Lady Donna Edwards and Louisiana for her excellent leadership. As the founder of the Louisiana First Foundation, she has been leading on the global human trafficking and the summit for years and connecting human trafficking experts and the survivors across the nation. More importantly, thank you for allowing the state of Maryland to share our models with the national and global communities. I also wanted to thank the Foundation's executive team and the First Lady Edward's staff for the organizing today's event. You have done an incredible job. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the team members from the state of Maryland who have made it dedication to ending human trafficking within our state's board. I am proud of all of you and truly appreciate your commitment to defeating human trafficking. First, I would like to introduce Mr. Joe Baldwin, Assistant USA Attorney at the USA Attorney's Office, District of Maryland. He is the Human Trafficking Coordinator for the USA Attorney's Office and the Chair of the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force. The mission of the task force is to combat human trafficking using many approaches that Joe will describe for us. Next, I would like to introduce my great friend, Glenn Houston, Executive Director of the Maryland Governor's Office of the Crime Prevention and Youth and the Victims Service, working with my husband. Glenn and his team have successfully run new programs and grants to support the fight against human trafficking and provide resources for victims. For our discussion on how they work in local area, we have invited Ms. Joanna Gisman from Washington County and Ms. Marian Gill from Cecil County. They will provide you with a great discussion and lessons. We have also invited another excellent team of state and local offices to cover both perspectives. Ms. Michelle Pa, Executive Director of the Social Service Administration at the Maryland Department of Human Service. We'll team up with Mr. Michael Piercy, Director of Washington County Department of Social Service. In Maryland, we are also fortunate to have a number of outstanding nonprofit leaders. Ms. Susan Esselman is the founder and the director of the University of Maryland SAFE Center and has decades of experience in protecting and defending human trafficking victims and survivors from many different countries. Her global expertise will help us understand how transnational efforts and the University of Maryland's model are related and mutually beneficial. Ms. Susan Hansel, the state chapter director of the Maryland Children's Alliance, has done great work to connect the national and the local centers for victims of child trafficking. She has participated in the Louisiana First Foundation's annual summit. Her team works hard. I look forward to hearing more from her. Lastly, academia is very significant for this fight. Dr. Nadine Pinnican-Carr is the Director for Prevention of Adolescent Risk initiative at the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Social Work. She has devoted her career to research that identifies youth at risk for violence and victimization, and ultimately works to prevent them from becoming victims. I would like to tell you why I am interested in helping victims and the survivors of human trafficking. Before the First Lady of Maryland, I am the mother of the 3 daughters, a grandmother of 4 grandchildren, and a teacher. My heart is broken for all victims of human trafficking and their families. These victims are like our sons and daughters, my grandchildren, and the students. My advocacy work is also inspired by you and the fellow Marylanders, including my second daughter, Jamie, who fights for victims of crimes on the front line as a state prosecutor. I cannot believe human trafficking and modern slavery are happening right next to us in our own backyard. This is not about someone else. This is about us. It is our problem. I cannot believe human trafficking is a huge global business for some people. I cannot stop thinking that right now they take children away from their homes and the parents, then abuse. This is the reason why we all should stand up and work together to combat human trafficking, not only in the state of Maryland, but across the country and the world. Your continued support and the leaderships are important to make a real difference within your communities. I hope today's summit gives you an opportunity to learn more about the Marylanders' anti-human trafficking efforts and to take what you learn back to your states and the communities. Then we can never forget about those who need us. We will never give up on our right for fight for our sons and daughters and their children. Again, I really appreciate all of you for your hard work and participation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Baldwin, as First Lady Yumi Hogan just noted. I want to thank the First Lady and also First Lady Edwards for providing us with this opportunity to share information this morning. As anyone who's been involved in this effort for any length of time knows, we're constantly learning and trying to improve our own processes, and the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force is no different than any organization in that regard. I'm going to see if I can share my video now. Okay, I'm hoping that you're going to see it in just a second. And my presentation today is advancing on all fronts, and I'll get to the reason for that in just a moment. But as a brief bio, I'm with the Naval Academy. That's how I came to the state of Maryland. Originally graduated from the Naval Academy, served as a naval officer for 7 years of active duty, and then got the bug and went to law school. And I've sort of demonstrated the utility of a law degree over my career. I've been in private practice doing patent litigation. I was a civil defense attorney for the United States and did personal injury, medical malpractice, and FOIA litigation for a while. But for the last 6.5 years, I've been a prosecutor with a focus on crimes against children and human trafficking. And that's what brings me here to you today. Advancing all fronts, that's sort of a military metaphor, but I think it is very appropriate. We all use the term combating human trafficking. I want to briefly tell you a little anecdote about a general in the Marine Corps who was surrounded by 22 enemy divisions in a really bitterly cold battle. And he said, look, there they are in front of us. They're there behind us. They're on our left. They're on the right. There's no way they can get away from us now. And of course, he won that battle famously, the only general ever to win 4 Navy crosses. And I think that's where we are with respect to human trafficking for similar reasons. We have to advance on all fronts. Human traffickers, whether in the business of profiting from sex or labor, exploit the full range of vulnerabilities of their victims. And they cater to a diverse customer base driven by, frankly, myopic desires. Tips to fight trafficking must be at least as varied, not only to care for the various needs of survivors, but also for law enforcement to exploit the vulnerabilities of traffickers and consumers. The business models also differ. This adds complexity, but with the right mindset also provides opportunities for interdiction. With these factors in mind, I want to introduce you briefly this morning to the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force, an organization with hundreds of individual contributors and allied organizations throughout the state of Maryland. This is the roadmap for the talk today. Really, the meat of this is to share with you some, but by no means all, of the great work done by the task force and its members. I want also to share our current challenges and goals, because I hope we can find fellow travelers in this group out there who may be able to help us out with our problems, and we may be able to help you out with yours. There's a lot of ways to divide up the fight we are in. Our mission is combat human trafficking. These 4 axes you see here, prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnerships, is one good way to divide it up, because it emphasizes the numerous ways to contribute to the fight. Our task force structure reflects this multi-axis approach. I also like the 4 Ps because it reminds me of 6 Ps that a gunner's mate named Bear once taught me when I was a midshipman about how you have to be properly prepared, or you miss peak performance. There were a couple other Ps that I won't repeat on this on this talk, but bottom line is that my job is to be prepared and to help plan folks, so we can have peak performance in all these various range of activities, and I'll discuss some of those. First, just to get into the structure, I think structure is important for how you fight this fight. Our task force, I'm sure many do, has a very horizontal structure. There's 7 committees now. The real heart of the task force is the Victim Services Committee and the Law Enforcement and Training Committees. But there are other incredibly important committees, like the Legislative Committee that I'll discuss, the Public Awareness Committee, and also the Grants Committee that helps our members. Finally, Labor Trafficking Committee, which was just stood up, and that's really going well. We're trying to get that started in the state. One of the things we emphasize with all these committees is to lighten the load by having co-chairs and provide opportunities for more people to contribute. And I think that's incredibly important in this area, because there's so many people who are energized and activated, and you have to give them some leadership and responsibility. And frankly, there's a lot of volunteers out there, and the way that you reward volunteers is to give them responsibility and missions. And thankfully, in the state of Maryland, we have a lot of wonderful volunteers who work very hard on this, some on behalf of their home organizations, and some just purely individual citizens who chair local task forces, et cetera. Similarly, I've stressed that the committees are better off if they have some subcommittees for specialization, increased participation, and just going forward, let me tell you about some of those. The training committee it trains law enforcement professionals, officers, and other professionals. They identify and investigate human trafficking in a trauma-informed manner, which is very important. They provided training in 16 Maryland counties in the last couple of years. There's about 35 regional or statewide programs that they presented. And you can see we're reaching a lot of law enforcement officers and other professionals, including EMTs and others who might come into contact with trafficking victims. There's also Metro police officers, all different kinds of people who might see individual vulnerable victims and be able to act. Here's some of the titles that the training committee has covered. There's some key conferences every year. There's an annual statewide human trafficking investigator seminar and a professional seminar. Both of those are happening in October of this year. We gather speakers from all over the country. We provide case studies. We talk about things important to the treatment of victims and survivors, which are important both for the investigators, the law enforcement persons, and of course the professionals also need to know about the law enforcement side. So there's quite a bit of cross-pollination built into these trainings. And you can see some of the other various things that just happened while we were under the work of COVID. And those are, all helpful titles, and there's many more that have been presented. The Victim Services Committee, as I said, is a very critical committee. You can see there's 191 individual members. They're very enthusiastic and energetic group. The co-chair sent me this slide. As you can see, it's much more colorful than the other slides. She's upbeat, and the Victim Services Committee is that. They are aggressive, they are organized, and they really push forward the interests of victims in the state in a remarkable way. I want to talk about one of their, actually a couple of projects that center from the Victim Services Committee. The Victims Services Committee realized that they need to provide training to help mental health professionals on human trafficking and the needs of survivors. And so they developed this mental health training series. And the fruits of the labor, the ultimate goal they have is to have a human trafficking clinician collaborative, which is actually in place now. There's approximately 30 clinicians who are now coming to this. This has been a big success. They talk to various partners, which include the task force, but other very active organizations in our state, some of whom are shown here, in order to put together this training and to host a lot of topics. With respect to topics, here's the two first trainings. It's a curriculum, Human Trafficking 101, 201, and 301. This doesn't cover all the materials that you see in the curriculum, but basic human trafficking ideas are presented in the first section. The licensed social workers, you have to be a licensed social worker to participate because this is meant for professionals. This talks about the basics of Human Trafficking 101, some of the important concepts that we see over and over again. Human Trafficking 201 goes a little deeper. Neurobiology, as you see, trauma bonding impact, trauma-informed intervention for various reasons, how to do it. You can see that the presenters differ. In 101, we have law enforcement, we have victim service providers, and we have actual survivor come and talk. In the 201, it is actual trauma it is the trauma therapists who are presenting as the training becomes more professionalized. And finally, in Human Trafficking 301, it's trauma therapists and survivors, and it really digs in deep to the therapeutic alliance and building rapport and topics like that. So we're very proud of this, and it's really having an effect. Human Trafficking Clinician Collaborative is creating, a sustainable environment for people to learn about human trafficking and to treat survivors. Also, the medical subcommittee is a subcommittee of the Victim Services Committee. They discovered a need to train healthcare providers on the critical role they play in helping survivors. And they put together a SERVE model that basically focuses on how to deal with human trafficking survivors, to identify them for one thing, but how to care for them and provide them support, not necessarily an evidence gathering mechanism, but more of a way to be sensitive to the issues that can be brought. And that has been a very robust process. There's been 10 venues where training's been provided, 12 events, nurses, physicians, social workers, pharmacists, 454 individual participants. It's been a very successful program so far, and they're continuing with that. Let me talk about that legislative committee just briefly. It's open to the public. We're very proud of this committee. It identifies, analyzes, debates, and tracks proposed legislation. There's real experts on this thing. I've sat in on their meetings and I'm just overwhelmed and humbled by the expertise of these individuals. They participate in talking, in providing the overall committee with great input on a variety of legislation, and they have supported the legislation, some of which is seen on this page, that change the laws for the benefit of trafficking survivors, and also stiffens the laws, particularly for labor trafficking, which is a new law that was just rolled out and is one of the things our labor trafficking committee, actually the thing our labor trafficking committee is focused on. We also have a public awareness committee that has a speakers bureau of experts. They do radio spots like on iHeartRadio. There's social media. They try to amplify the efforts of all our member organizations who have their own platforms for that. And they like to work with local task forces and provide expertise from the main task force to the local task force. Just briefly, the challenges I wanted to mention, I think everybody's dealing with. We've got technology often advantages the traffickers, and we're always trying to figure out where they're coming from and how they're advertising. There's a variety of trafficking models that is complex, and they have to be handled in different ways, both from the victim services side and from the prosecution side. One real problem we have is a lack of accurate, comprehensive data on the scope of the problem, the number of victims who are actually being served by victim service providers, the number of individuals who are engaged in human trafficking in an area, the number of prosecutions that are done. Some of that is based on stovepipes because of individual jurisdictions and counties or localities, the federal government. We need to do better at that. The internal struggles of every task force is the rotation of personnel. So you're constantly trying to train people, and of course, we're a volunteer organization. Here's our goals in the short term: is to gather accurate data, develop methods for information sharing between victim survivor organizations and law enforcement, i.e. intelligence, in a way that doesn't expose the victims, but helps us cue in on what the current trends are to sort of overcome our technological disadvantage at times. Develop an intelligence fusion database and infrastructure with the Fusion Center to leverage databases that are out there already, and to schedule and organize a training cycle to address the problem of people leaving and rotating, and also have a rational means of providing information to our members and the state at large. Finally, partnerships is the lifeblood of everything and undergirds everything I just told you. If we can help you with your fight, please let us know how. Contact us if you have any questions about the things that I put up here. There's many other programs. If you've already solved the problems I've identified, let us know. We'd really appreciate it. And maybe we can help you too. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Our next presenter is Glenn Fuston, Executive Director of Maryland's Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services. Glenn.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter. I really appreciate the introduction, and I certainly want to say thank you to First Lady Edwards for co-hosting this and bringing this to us in the state of Maryland and allowing us to participate. But I certainly want to call attention to First Lady Hogan, whose leadership in this front has really allowed our office to continue to grow and put the attention necessary to fight this horrible threat. So I just want to say thank you to First Lady Hogan for all of her leadership. Our office, the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services, under First Lady Hogan's leadership, as well as Governor Hogan's leadership, has really changed. We are now a multidisciplinary office that is able to focus on not only law enforcement response, but response to victim services as well as children and youth. So all three of those disciplines now fall under this office, and we're, as the state administering agency, allowed to administer grant funds that are going to support different programs that cross across those disciplines. And as we all know, human trafficking certainly is one of those threats that is going to cause us to cross over these disciplines. So we do that a lot by utilizing data, by utilizing information to better understand where the problems are, what the problems are, and then we utilize that same data in order to create programs that are going to be impactful and have an impact to save and help those that are in most in need. Then we use that data to also create measurements in order to see if those programs are having an impact. And I'm happy to share some of those with you today. As I mentioned, our office is multidisciplinary. We work on the policy front and program front, as well as the grant front for law enforcement and criminal justice issues, victim service issues across the state, as well as children and youth. One of the first things that Governor Hogan did to our office was to combine all of the victim service programming into one location underneath of our office. So now our office is able to see the breadth and the comprehensive look of across all of the victim service needs in the state, including the human trafficking realm. But as importantly, we're able to sit down with professionals from law enforcement, the victim services community, as well as children and youth community to make sure that we're all working together and pushing on the same flywheel in the same direction. He's tasked our office with addressing the issue of human trafficking through funding, training, awareness, and legislation. So I hope that I'm able to talk about some of those that we do today. As a state administering agency, a lot of times people think of our office as the grant agency. Where is the money? Where can I find the money? And we're very happy to administer those dollars for the governor and the first lady. And we've so far administered 217 unique grants that are focused on human trafficking in the state of Maryland for a total of $58 million. And we currently have 68 active grants totaling $18 million that are going out into the human trafficking field right now. The thing that we like to highlight, though, is that these dollars are a part of the solution, obviously, and you're going to hear from a lot of great presenters today from the state of Maryland, many of which that we partner with to move forward. And that is what I think is really the solution here, is the collaboration across our partnerships and across our disciplines. So I mentioned the Victim Services Unit already and how we brought that unit together in order to focus on all of the different victims that we have in the state of Maryland. We also know that there's co-occurring challenges that we have there, so we're able to see that. We also have the law enforcement component of that, and our law enforcement component is the Maryland Criminal Intelligence Network. And this is a network of 15 different nodes across the state that are focused on identifying, disrupting, and dismantling trafficking networks that are trafficking people across the state of Maryland. They also focus on other threats, obviously, with drugs, firearms, and the like, because we know that they're there. But one of the unique approaches that we've taken with these task forces, we've trained each one of these groups to do several things. First is to identify where the victims are. So our victims are first and foremost right in front of the law enforcement. They know when they run across a victim, where services can go. And we'll talk about the Regional Navigator program that the governor set up a couple of years ago in just a moment. But these law enforcement entities are also instructed to collect data and to share that data. And just as we just heard from the chairperson of the Maryland Human Trafficking Network, data is a challenge for us to collect. But we've made it a priority to make sure that we're collecting that information and putting it into a single location so that we can begin to see better where the trafficking network exists and how we can go after addressing them. We're also making sure, again, that we're collecting the information about the victims. And the governor signed into law legislation that required us to create a network called the Regional Navigator Program. And this was back in 2019. And this Regional Navigator Program requires law enforcement and local departments of social services to notify a regional navigator when they encounter a youth that they have a reason to believe was a victim of sex trafficking. And these regional navigators either provide services directly to that young person, or they connect that youth to services that are out there in the field. And this is obviously, again, a place for us to work across our disciplines. So we're working with local departments of social services, departments of juvenile services, sexual assault crisis programs, child advocacy programs, offices of public defender, and other state and local resources that you'll hear from today. This program works with youth up to the age of 24, and it's continuing to expand across our state. We're looking to have it in each one of our jurisdictions, our 24 jurisdictions, in the next year or so that we can continue to develop that partnership and collaboration. Currently, the regional navigators are housed in churches, social services agencies, police departments, child advocacy centers, and we work with the SAFE Center that you're going to hear from Dr. Esserman here in just a little bit. We're really happy with some of the outcomes that we're seeing because of our programs. To date, just in the first year of operation with our Law Enforcement Maryland Criminal Intelligence Network, we were able to identify 41 victims that we were able to provide resources to. And in total, the program to date has provided resources to over 125 individuals that have been identified in that network. So as we continue to grow this, our office through Governor Hogan and First Lady Hogan is committed to making sure that we have that conversation still between our disciplines, law enforcement, or the criminal justice arena, the victim services arena, as well as our children and youth, and that we continue to bring services to human trafficking victims across the state of Maryland. So I thank you for this opportunity. I am very appreciative of all the programs that we have on here today and the opportunity to showcase what Maryland is doing. And please let us know if there's anything we can do to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn, and your office for your leadership. Our next co-presenters are Johanna Giesman, Program Coordinator for the Washington County Safe Place Child Advocacy Center, and Marion Gill, Coordinator of the Family Violence Programs for the Cecil County and Trafficking Regional Navigator for the Cecil County Child Advocacy Center. Johanna and Marion.
Good morning, and thank you. On behalf of the Cecil County Child Advocacy Center and Washington County Child Advocacy Center, thank you to First Lady Yumi Hogan and First Lady Donna Edwards, as well as the first spouses who are dedicated to eliminating human sex trafficking. Thank you as well to Governor Hogan and Director of Houston and our network of child advocacy centers, as well as the Maryland Children Alliance. My name is Marion Gill, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker at the Cecil County Child Advocacy Center. I've worked the majority of my 16-year career at our local child advocacy center. I've held a variety of roles within our program to include child protective services, forensic interviewer, and child protective services supervisor. Most recently, in early 2020, I had the pleasure of transitioning into the regional navigator role. And in January 2021, I transitioned into the coordinator of our child advocacy center role, carrying both roles until just a few weeks ago when we were able to hire an amazing regional navigator here in Cecil County. I am committed and excited about the work our CAC does every day to combat sexual abuse as well as human trafficking. Additionally, I would like to thank Cecil County government and the Cecil County executive for allowing us to pursue this effort and continue this position under the leadership of the Department of Community Services. All of this work, however, would not be possible without the members of our CAC multidisciplinary team, who will specifically be mentioned later in our presentation.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Johanna Giesman, and I am the program coordinator of the Safe Place Child Advocacy Center in Washington County, Maryland. And I am really thrilled to be here with you today. I want to start by saying thank you to Executive Director Houston, as well as Governor Hogan for your support towards furthering the mission of child advocacy centers. I also want to say thank you to First Lady Yumi Hogan and First Lady Donna Edwards for your leadership and for the opportunity to be here today. I began my career as a victims advocate in Washington County over 15 years ago, and I've had the privilege of working alongside the Safe Place multidisciplinary team for almost 7 years now, and the most current 3 years as their multidisciplinary team coordinator and program coordinator. I will say that one aspect of my current position that I find most rewarding is being an advocate for my team so that they have the resources and tools such as those provided through the Regional Navigator program necessary for a safer and thriving community. Next slide, please. And so now I want to shift gears and focus specifically on our children and our youth. So, according to data collected by the Child Sex Trafficking Victims Initiative at the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Social Work, between June of 2013 and May of 2020, there were 679 reports of child sex trafficking screened by the local departments of social services screening units. And the next two slides that you will see will share a breakdown by jurisdiction and year of those reports. Next slide. And however, I don't think anyone would disagree with me that's here with us today that even one report is too many. And since 2015, the Hogan administration has allocated no less than $54 million to organizations addressing human trafficking in Maryland. As the number of reports of child sex trafficking continues to trend upwards, this allocation has allowed programs such as child advocacy centers like Safe Place to build their capacity and confidence with trauma-focused best practices to ultimately improve identification and access to critical services for young victims of sex trafficking, so that they can not only survive their trauma, but also thrive.
Human sex trafficking is a relatively broad term. However, it is a form of victimization that is a subset of a broader problem of child sexual abuse. The focus for child advocacy centers throughout the state is the sex trafficking of minors and the commercial sexual exploitation of young victims. The commercial sexual exploitation and sex trafficking of children are forms of sexual abuse and deserving of a multidisciplinary team response. Child advocacy centers throughout the state of Maryland, through the gracious support and leadership of Maryland Children's Alliance, have made great strides to implement protocols and to build capacity and confidence of our multidisciplinary teams with respect to responding to allegations of trafficking and exploitation. In 2015, Governor Hogan signed into law the establishment of a work group to study safe harbor policy for youth victims of human trafficking. The legislation tasked the work group with studying legal protections and the provision of services for youth victims of human trafficking. In 2017, the final report included recommendations towards the implementation of a network of regional navigators. The Regional Navigator Project was developed after Governor Hogan signed into law the Child Sex Trafficking Screening and Services Act of 2019. The law requires law enforcement and local departments of social services who have reason to believe a child is a victim of sex trafficking to notify a regional navigator in their jurisdiction or region to obtain needed services for the child. The law states that as of January 2022, each county or region in Maryland will have a designated regional navigator of victim services for high risk and trafficked youth. The regional navigator can serve any youth or young adult up to age 24 who is suspected, or confirmed to be a victim of sex trafficking. The regional navigator can assist with providing or connecting youth with the following services: safety planning, emergency response, basic living needs, trauma counseling and mental health services, drug and alcohol abuse treatment, legal services, victim advocacy, and case management. The list could go on and on. Ultimately, we are making progress towards creating a network of navigators who will expand access to critical services for survivors of sex trafficking.
And now I want to shift our focus specifically to Washington County. We are located in the western part of Maryland. Our county actually borders 3 states, Pennsylvania to the north, Northern Virginia to the south, and the eastern panhandle of West Virginia to the south and the west. In Washington County, the Safe Place is a government-based child advocacy center with the Washington County Department of Social Services. And while the CAC is a government-based program, we are still dependent upon the very gracious support of the governor's office, as well as the Washington County Board of Commissioners and the Maryland Department of Human Services. We are so grateful for your support and for your partnership. 20 years now, the Safe Place has been providing trauma-informed services to Washington County's most vulnerable population, our children and our youth. This includes providing a multidisciplinary team response to the investigation and prosecution, as well as coordination of specialized treatment and supportive services in cases of sex abuse, trafficking and exploitation, which you may hear me use those words interchangeably, severe physical abuse and neglect, as well as child fatalities. So how did a child advocacy center in Western Maryland become involved in the fight against, or rather to eliminate, sex trafficking? Well, to start, if you were to do a quick Google search with the words Washington County, Maryland and child sex trafficking, next slide, you will discover several local headlines that highlight exactly what's happening in our community. Of the 679 reports that I mentioned earlier when I first began my presentation, Washington County Department of Social Services received the second most number of reports out of all 24 local jurisdictions, the local Department of Social Services. And while we know anyone can become a victim of trafficking, there's a prevalence in Washington County of certain risk factors that make our community and our population a little bit more vulnerable. For example, Interstate 70 traveling east and west, and 81 traveling north and south, which has also become known as Heroin Highway, crisscross our county, making travel in and out of the state extremely easy. These highways also provide direct access to several neighboring states, as well as very easy access to cities such as DC and Baltimore, and multiple international airports and various sporting and entertainment venues. The heroin epidemic in particular in our community is continuing to impact us. Washington County is now one of the top 5 jurisdictions in the state of Maryland for the number of drug-related overdoses. And there's increased rates of poverty and individuals who are homeless, and a large population of folks in that 18 to 24 group that are homeless, as well as youth who have really run away or have resorted to survival sex to meet their basic needs. And all of these factors, again, I think contribute to making our community more vulnerable. Next slide, please. And while it's important to while it's really actually impossible to fully capture and credit all of the excellent work that's being done throughout the state and in Washington County to address sex trafficking, I want to bring our attention to the years of 2015 and 2017. Around this time, we were noticing that the numbers of child sex trafficking cases being referred to the Child Advocacy Center through the local Department of Social Services was continuing to grow. And during the same time, a few key events really happened in our community that helped set the stage for where we are now and where we are hoping to go from here. To start, members of law enforcement, the local judiciary, various government and community-based agencies, including representatives from the Washington County Department of Social Services and the Child Advocacy Center, gathered to form a task force, which has since evolved to become known as the Washington County Anti-Human Trafficking Collaborative. And since this collaborative was established in 2019, we have focused efforts on preventing the exploitation of our community's most vulnerable youth and adults. During the same time period, through the generous support of the governor's office, the CAC was able to allocate resources towards the professional development of our multidisciplinary team, specifically around our response to child sex trafficking. And we were able to expand our capacity of the CAC by hiring a full-time anti-sex trafficking advocate. The CAC, in collaboration with the Washington County Department of Social Services, various government and community-based organizations, have been very successful in pulling our resources together to host multiple outreach and educational events that featured leading experts from around the state. And then in 2020, something really big happened for us. The Safe Place was one of 3 original programs fortunate to be selected during the initial phase of the Regional Navigator pilot, which someone asked me recently why I thought our jurisdiction was selected. And really, I think it is largely attributed to those vulnerabilities that I mentioned, as well as the high number of reports that we are receiving at the local department and at the Safe Place. Next slide, please. While the task of implementing the Regional Navigator pilot in Washington County is multifaceted, I think it's important to note that the CAC's national accreditation with National Children's Alliance, as well as our existing partnership memorandums of understanding and protocols really helped provide us with a solid foundation to implement this program. With that, our strategy for implementation has largely focused again upon building upon our existing relationships, resources, and services to ultimately improve our response and expand access to those specialized services that Marion had mentioned earlier. And this includes efforts to develop enhanced protocols for the multidisciplinary team, establish the regional navigator beyond the point of contact for the local Department of Social Services, but to include local law enforcement, as well as continuing to make progress towards implementing comprehensive evidence-based screening tools and needs assessments. Next slide, please. We've also prioritized the creation of a new regional navigator position. In doing so, we are integrating the regional navigator with the CAC's MDT and case review team. And as we continue with implementation, it is a priority that the regional navigator begin to expand training and awareness activities to our community and to connect the regional navigator with other anti-trafficking efforts, such as the statewide task force, our local collaborative, and the other regional navigators and pilot sites throughout the state. In terms of program oversight, locally, myself and the social work supervisor provide direct supervision of this position. And then the CAC's management team is largely responsible for the protocol development, identification of best practices, program evaluation, and then all aspects of the funding management and data collection. Next slide, please. And while we have faced some setbacks with fully implementing the program, largely due to COVID and then challenges during the recruitment process, we've also celebrated some successes that I'd like to highlight. To start, in 2020, a jury found a Washington County man guilty on charges that included human sex trafficking, sexual abuse of a minor, sexual solicitation of minors, and third-degree sex offenses. This was a very complex and emotionally charged case that required skillful collaboration and coordination throughout the life of the case between our Child Advocacy Center's MDT members. And now this man was sentenced to 100 years and he will end up serving, I believe, around 60 years in prison for his crimes. What's more, I consider it a great success that in Washington County, we have an extremely dedicated community of professionals and concerned citizens who are committed to focusing efforts towards raising awareness and the facilitation of opportunities for more education and prevention programs in our community. And I think what distinguishes the CAC's previous efforts to address sex trafficking from the goals and objectives of the Regional Navigator pilot is that this opportunity really has provided us with greater and more public access to resources and a network of regional navigators, which really allows greater opportunities to address both macro and micro level prevention and intervention strategies. So at the end of last year, we were truly beyond thrilled and grateful to learn that Governor Hogan supported the expansion of the pilot program and the network of regional navigators for a second year, and that ultimately we would be able to continue in this with this work in Washington County. And now I will turn it over to Marion, who will talk a little bit more about Washington County and her program.
Okay. Thank you, Johanna. So moving over here to Cecil County on the other side of the state. In general, Cecil County is considered somewhat of a hotspot for human trafficking based on a variety of factors. Primarily Cecil County's location directly halfway between Baltimore and Philadelphia, multiple in-county truck stops, the presence of a casino, accessibility to major highways, and highly saturated opioid community, with Cecil County being recognized specifically as a high-intensity drug trafficking area. Our rest stops, truck stops, and bus stations are often considered primary locations for traffickers to exploit their victims. Traffickers often utilize our highways, especially Interstate 95, to connect victims to major East Coast cities. Addiction is also one of the most powerful tools that human traffickers have to coerce, manipulate, and exploit our victims. By creating or perpetuating dependency on opioids as well as other substances and acting as a means for continued access, traffickers can prolong exploitation situations. The Cecil County Child Advocacy Center provides a multi-agency approach to the investigation, prosecution, and treatment of child sexual abuse. This collaboration enhances the investigation process, facilitates prosecution of those who commit these crimes in Cecil County, and promotes emotional healing for the victim and families. The Child Advocacy Center's multidisciplinary team consists of Cecil County government, the State's Attorney's Office, Cecil County Sheriff's Office, the Maryland State Police, the Elkton Police Department, Christiana Care at Union Hospital, the local Department of Social Services, our Domestic Violence Rape Crisis Center, and several other partners in the community. Our team has embraced the incorporation of trafficking as well as the role of the regional navigator and continue to observe the value associated with this position. I'm happy to say our regional navigator is currently on the other side of our building with a lot of our community partners, many of our multidisciplinary team, including the Federal Bureau of Investigations, actively working on a case. I'm also happy to report that tomorrow, a case that was handled here in Cecil County federally will be, one of the traffickers will be sentenced tomorrow. So we're excited about that. Much like Johanna had said, if you had searched for Washington County, if you had done the similar search for Cecil County and put in the words Cecil County with trafficking, it would reveal these results. In this slide, you can see the underscoring of the issue of human trafficking in our community, as well as the work being done to combat human trafficking. All the headlines included in this slide have included work done by our Child Advocacy Center multidisciplinary team, trafficking task force, as well as our community partners. We believe as a Child Advocacy Center that the work we are doing and these highlights help create awareness through achieving our mission and goals. Our Child Advocacy Center had began to observe an influx in trafficking allegations within Cecil County leading up to 2017. However, in the summer of 2017, we received a case that we didn't feel particularly prepared for. As a result, we worked hard as a team, relied on local and federal partners, which this resulted in several resources being provided for the victim, as well as ultimately a federal prosecution of 3 traffickers. But what we learned as a team was truly invaluable. Once the dust settled a little bit on that, the Cecil County Human Trafficking Task Force through our Child Advocacy Center was developed in a response. As a result, several community agencies aligned for the purpose of providing a coordinated multidisciplinary team response to trafficking cases. The Cecil County Human Trafficking Task Force is organized into 3 separate components in order to address the wide-spanning issue of trafficking. The 3 components of this task force include a resource committee, investigation committee, and prevention committee. All 3 committees work to provide a coordinated response to Cecil County surrounding trafficking. As a team, we also identified a need to provide resources to the victims in order to provide a more efficient service delivery. As a result, we created a team to organize a fundraiser in the form of a hot wing eating contest. You might be saying, did I just say hot wings? But yes, I did. We have organized a yearly hot wing eating contest in the month of January at our local casino with first responders in the community participating. We're happy to say January 2022 will be our 5th year organizing the event, and it has been extremely successful each year. It has also allowed us to raise funds and implement services that otherwise we would not have been available at the time. In 2020, after applying for the Regional Navigator Grant, Cecil was thrilled to be selected as one of the 3 pilot sites for Maryland. This allowed our team to fully implement some of the previously identified much needed resources into our program. With the addition of a regional navigator to our Child Advocacy Center team, this has allowed direct service provision to increase, as well as the awareness, education, and education to our community as a whole to flourish. While this was difficult during the midst of a pandemic, we believe the implementation was more timely than ever. In 2021, the Regional Navigator Project has continued to develop in our education, prevention, and direct services to trafficking victims in our community. We project this year to grow our Regional Navigator program as well as services to our community. By year 2022, we are excited to see the full implementation as a program and networking established through the state for the Regional Navigator Project. Allowing an organized, victim-centered approach which will enhance the service delivery to victims as well as hopefully accountability to offenders. In our first year of the Regional Navigator program, familiar to all of us is 2020, the year where COVID happened. We had really big plans, some of which we still continue with, but a lot of them we had to put those plans right in the shredder and start over. We did this to be able to effectively meet the needs of our clients and our community. Our first step was establishing a 24-hour response to trafficking. We did this through spreading contact information for the Regional Navigator throughout the community, as well as partnering with our local Domestic Violence Rape Crisis Center for a 24-hour response option. Next, we wanted to immediately communicate with local law enforcement and the Department of Social Services that the Regional Navigator would be the point of contact for trafficking within Cecil County. We then focused on the development of a memorandum of understanding for our team. This would assist in formalizing the process, fine-tune our response, and assist in the communication within the team. Our direct service to victims and case management of cases was at the forefront of our goals when developing our program. The screening tool that we have began to implement within our community is an adaptation of the Minnesota screening tool, and we have began to utilize this within Cecil so far with very positive feedback. This would also assist in community partners speaking the same language surrounding trafficking, enhancing the ability to communicate more effectively. Throughout our first year, we facilitated training within the community in many different virtual training options, and are happy to report we just did our first in-person training, I think last week. We also created awareness through billboards, social media, and promotional items displayed throughout the community. We created this flow chart in order to simplify the response for the Regional Navigator for our community. As the program itself is new and we were all learning together, we thought this would be an excellent tool to be able to distribute and partners routinely utilize. Our Child Advocacy Center's relationship with the Domestic Violence Rape Crisis Center, locally known as the Bridge, is paramount. In my current role as the coordinator of family violence programs, I have oversight of our Child Advocacy Center as well as our Domestic Violence Rape Crisis Center. However, from the onset, the Regional Navigator Project, we have partnered locally with the Domestic Violence Rape Crisis Center to provide services to both programs. Specifically, the immediate response and ability for victims to have 24-hour accessibility to contact staff for resources. The Regional Navigator Program and focus on the 18 to 24 age range has given us the ability to provide services to victims in this age bracket that might not have fit into any other system nicely in the past, hence identifying the need and filling in the gap. It is noted throughout this flow chart that cooperation from a victim with the local Department of Social Services or law enforcement is not required to participate in the Regional Navigator Program. Much like Joanna said, we're really proud of our community awareness, specifically in 2020. We have worked really hard to create a response in our community that promotes awareness of human trafficking. We partnered with a local Cecil County designer to create a logo for our task force, as well as creation of several billboards. A common statement we hear in the community as far as feedback to the billboards is, does trafficking really happen here? Or we didn't know it was a problem here in Cecil County. These statements create a really great opening for conversation and promote an opportunity for education. This past January, our team participated in the Red Sand event, which involved several community partners and citizens and survivors placing the sand in cracks throughout the community with an idea that they were filling in the cracks for these survivors of trafficking, hence making the vulnerable visible. You'll also see our wing fundraiser, as I mentioned earlier, which has continued to be a successful event, raising over $5,000 each year. We are immensely fortunate to have such a dedicated multidisciplinary team who are committed to making Cecil County a community where trafficking is not accepted. This billboard highlights the agency logos of members of our local trafficking task force and was locally designed and released in January 2021 during Trafficking Awareness Month, and serves as a thank you to both our partners and our community. As a network of regional navigators, we have been participating. So moving on to Maryland, as far as the entire program for regional navigators, We've been participating in monthly strategic meetings facilitated by the governor's office and the Prevention of Adolescents Risk Initiative at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. While our individual jurisdictions have unique needs and resources, the overall mission and focus of the Maryland Regional Navigator teams is to collaborate to create a statewide approach to improving the identification of survivors of sex trafficking and coordination of needed services and supports. As a network of regional navigators, while the missions of our individual agencies may differ, we've been working together towards the collective vision of creating a learning community where regional navigator teams can access mutual support, ongoing learning, and professional development as they work to strengthen Maryland's effort to combat human trafficking. Thank you all for your time. We've added my contact information here, as well as Joanna's on the next slide. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Johanna and Marion, for your leadership and efforts. And it's always good news to hear when traffickers are found guilty and sentenced. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
We will now have another co-presentation by Michelle Farr, Executive Director of the Social Services Administration, Maryland Department of Social Services, and Michael Piercy, Director of the Washington County Department of Social Services.
Thank you so much. Good morning or good day to everyone. I just want to say on behalf of Maryland's Department of Human Services, Secretary Padilla, I want to express my gratitude to First Lady Umi Hogan and First Lady Donna Edwards for providing a forum where we can share our knowledge and experiences to advance the work to prevent and eliminate trafficking, especially among our children and our youth. I also, though, want to take the time to thank the Louisiana First Foundation and all the organizers of this event for inviting Mike and me to share Maryland's accomplishments and our steadfast efforts, as you've heard thus far, to address this pervasive human rights issue. So let's talk first and foremost about what Maryland wants to ensure. We want to ensure, next slide, please. Thank you. We want to ensure that we are accurately representing the youth in care as victims of trafficking. Thus, it is critical for child welfare staff to be able to identify victims of sex trafficking or those at risk of trafficking, and to make sure that referrals are appropriate and that we have available services to serve this population. Since 2017, the Maryland Department of Human Services and Social Services Administration has made tremendous strides, and you've heard that already. We've developed and implemented policies and procedures related to identifying victims of sex trafficking. We've also provided training for our child welfare staff across the continuum regarding reporting missing and runaway youth served by our child welfare organization. We've screened runaway children served by child welfare for both possible victimization as well as risk of victimization, and most importantly, collecting the data related to sex trafficking so that we can continue to enhance our services and our partnerships with the other providers within the state of Maryland. And as we're doing today, be able to share the work that we're doing in hopes to influence work in other areas as well. So in Maryland, child sex trafficking is expressly identified as a form of child sex abuse, regardless of the child's relationship to the perpetrator. In 2017, Governor Hogan signed the Senate Bill 308, which altered the definition of child abuse, aligning our work with the federal government requirements. Child Protective Services not only investigates allegations of sex trafficking when a trafficker, pimp, or a buyer is involved, but also investigates when there is no trafficker involved and the child has engaged in a commercial sex act. Our data tells us that law enforcement and our local department staff continue to be the primary reporting source for our sex trafficking reports. So to give you an idea of the impact of trafficking to Maryland's child welfare system, and you heard some of the data that was shared by our Cecil County and Washington County team, which I will reiterate to some extent. Between June 2013 and May of 2020, there have been 679 reports of child sex trafficking screened by our local department screening office, and we do applaud them in the efforts that they continue to do in identifying this egregious challenge. We have seen an increase in our child trafficking reports made to the 24 local departments from 2013 through 2019. Unfortunately, our complete 2020 data is unavailable at this time. However, we believe this trend may likely be due to the increased training and awareness, which is promoted by you and the efforts of all our partners. Between June of 2013 and May 2020, there have been 243 indicated findings of reports of child sex trafficking investigated by Maryland's Child Protective Services staff. Just so we're clear, an indicated finding is our terminology when there is enough information or evidence to determine that sex trafficking occurred. And considering the interconnected impact of race, it's important to note that 59% of the indicated findings, the victims were Black, 8% Hispanic, 23% white, and 2% other. If there is a suspicion of sex trafficking, however, insufficient evidence to accept the information as a CPS investigation, the local department will still do certain things. They'll conduct an assessment of the child and family situation. If warranted, provide ongoing child welfare services through the department's family preservation services, and they'll provide referrals and linkages to appropriate community resources and team with the family to follow through. However, whether completing an investigation or conducting an assessment, child welfare staff utilize a child sex trafficking screening interview tool. This tool was adapted by our Shares Hopes Intervene tool. The tool is used to guide our caseworkers' interview with the alleged trafficking victim. The tool is not only used by our Child Protective Services staff, but also by our foster care caseworkers every time a runaway child is located. And depending on the relationship the caseworker has with the child and the child's level of cooperation, there may be a need for more than one interview to discuss the runaway incident and to gather information necessary to identify trafficking or the risk of trafficking. I do want to share, and I think you've heard this earlier today as well, just echoing the importance of partnering. It would not be possible for our local departments of social services to work effectively with the survivors of sex trafficking without strong partnerships from our federal partners, our local law enforcement, our child advocacy centers, our local state's attorneys, medical providers that are trained in forensic exams, as well as our trauma-informed providers. Information sharing is critical between these disciplines as they occur as needed and at survivor-centered multidisciplinary team meetings in order to effectuate the most appropriate response to child sex trafficking survivors and their families. Our ongoing collaboration with the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services. Our newest partner in this work are the Sex Trafficking Regional Navigators, which you've just heard from. As shared previous in the previous presentation, that's a very critical partnership and a collaboration that we have. Our local departments of social services will work in partnership with each jurisdiction's navigator to provide services and resources for trafficked youth. And while there are only 10 jurisdictions that are currently involved in its entirety, we are looking to continue, as you've seen on the screen in our previous presentation, we are expanding those resources across the state. And so we're very, very proud of the work that we've been doing as it relates to our regional navigation work. I want to mention another very important partner that supports this work, and you will have an opportunity to hear from her, is the work that we're doing regarding our trafficking victims and their families through the University of Maryland School of Social Work, our Ruth H. Young Center. I'd like to recognize my colleague, Dr. Nadine Finnegan-Carr, whose staff works extremely closely with our department to provide technical assistance in all areas related to trafficking, one of which included training to hundreds of our child welfare staff, from CPS to family preservation to our out-of-home placement, on the role of the child welfare worker in engaging victims of sex trafficking. And it's because of this success with the initial statewide training of our child welfare staff, the training is now a part of all of the new staff training requirements offered by our Child Welfare Academy through our partnership with the University of the School of Social Work. So while I highlighted several areas where progress has been made in Maryland, we are fully aware that the work is far from finished. And as you heard earlier, even one incident of child sex trafficking is one too many. We will continue our efforts to support prevention of trafficking. And for those who are victims, we'll seek to identify the survivors and support the local, to support and locate services for them and their families. So at this time, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Mike Piercy, who will share his passion on this effort from a local department perspective. Mike?
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you for allowing me to present today. And thank you, First Lady Yumi Hogan and First Lady Donna Edwards for this great honor. As was stated before, my name is Mike Piercy. I am the director of the Washington County Department of Social Services in Western Maryland. Just in case you're wondering where we're at, like Johanna explained before, we are the warehousing spine that supports the mid-Atlantic cities of Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and Northern Virginia. So you'll see warehouses all up and down Interstate 81 of Lindt Chocolate, Pepsi, Volvo, Lowe's, Target, bringing a tremendous amount of commerce to the Baltimore, Washington suburbs. Unfortunately, we are also the back door to these suburbs for fentanyl, heroin, and sex trafficking. Out of 24 counties in Maryland and Baltimore City, we are fourth in state jurisdiction for human sex trafficking, despite being a small county in the foothills of Appalachia. So today, I would like to share two insights for policy and practice that come out of 7 years work in child welfare intake in Baltimore City and 20 years in child protective services investigations, clinical sex abuse treatment, and forensic interviewing at our Child Advocacy Center. So my first insight for policymakers is we need to stop feeding the problem. We need to guarantee a stable living arrangement for our foster children. In 2013, there was a report on human sex trafficking submitted to the House Ways and Means Committee, where the FBI stated that 60% of all human sex trafficked victims were presently or had experienced foster care placements. While not predictive, foster care placements is associated with human sex trafficking. Foster care placement is not disorienting, it's traumatic. Disrupted attachment, new living arrangements, court hearings, criminal charges, law enforcement, and social workers in a world swirling around you over which you have no control. Traffickers exploit these feelings of separation, imbalance, vulnerability by offering acceptance, affiliation, clothing, and a secure living arrangement, even at a cost. They are the sharks circling the minnows, which are our collective children. I urge you to do what we did in Washington County and dedicate one full-time caseworker whose only job it is to remove all youth from unstable living arrangements. Her key performance indicators are based solely on her ability to get kids into family-find relative living arrangements, treatment foster homes, or even their own housing. Safe housing, education, and a realistic path for a productive life is what most of these youth really want. Governor Hogan's administration early on recognized that secure housing was a necessary step for the victims of sex trafficking and foster care youth in order for them to achieve physical and emotional safety. Governor Hogan's New Futures state subsidy program allowed landlords to receive 1 year of rental vouchers to assist victims of human sex trafficking, foster care or intimate partner violence. 30% of their income, or $50, or whichever was more, must be paid by the youth or the victim, so they have ownership in their housing independence. This program looks very familiar to the 3-year HUD program, which was later set up called Foster Youth to Independence Housing Program. But Maryland is always glad to lead the way. We need to remember to also that when our children mess up, just like our own kids, we need to have patience. When these youth below 30% of that portion on their income, which was supposed to be spent on their rent, and they spend it on clothes or pizza or new shoes, we don't compel them back into survival, sex, and crime. We have a talk, we make a budget, we move through it, and then we move on. Amelia Frank Meyer at Aaliyah Innovation said, "We do what love would do." These are our children. You know, your parents most likely bailed you out many times as a teenager or young adult, or as a parent, you may be bailing out your own young adults. Second insight, make it a policy to engage these youth from an attachment perspective. Often in our zeal to get a conviction or incarcerate the traffickers, we trample on the very victims we are supposed to be helping. Holly Austin Smith, author of Walking Prey, spoke at the Maryland Children's Alliance conference one year and spoke of how she was treated by law enforcement, essentially like a prostitute. What was reinforced to her was the dehumanizing message that she was a criminal sex worker and not a human being. These youth will trigger and threaten you with every explicative, racial epithet, or gross body description imaginable. These youth will not be scared straight. You, policymakers, law enforcement officers, social workers need to be prepared mentally, emotionally, and verbally, and still be supportive of these youth in dangerous and contentious environments. Sue Johnson, the most globally recognized attachment psychologist and former foster care group home worker, taught that to establish a connection, our speech should be slow, soft, and simple. The purpose is not only to diffuse their protest response, but to connect. Another adopted strategy from Love and Logic parenting is the phrase, "I care too much to argue." Something that you could say to your sex trafficking victim is, "Look, I'm scared too, but your hell today does not have to be your life tomorrow." I'm not speaking here, I'm speaking here. There is a deep connection and a physiological change in both our brains and in our bodies when we know someone cares, even when we don't acknowledge it. Healing the scars of any type of sex abuse, including sex trafficking, is never all at once or once and for all. Don't give up on these young people, and please don't push them away for a well-intentioned but ultimately detrimental disclosure that may or may not come. No program or policy will compensate for failing to connect with these youth. And with the same spirit of Holly Austin Smith, I urge you to ignite their humanity, to ignite their hope, and teach them that their hell today is not their life tomorrow. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Directors Farr and Piercy, for such a powerful presentation. We've heard so many good words and initiatives that you all are doing in Maryland, and we just thank you for the great work that you're doing. Our next presenter is Ambassador Susan Esserman, founder and director of the University of Maryland's Support, Advocacy, Freedom, and Empowerment SAFE Center for Human Trafficking Survivors. Susan? You're on mute, Susan. Sorry.
So sorry. Good day, everyone. Thank you to First Ladies Yumi Hogan and Donna Edwards for your interest and support in combating human trafficking and offering us today a platform. The University of Maryland Safe Center for Human Trafficking Survivors is a unique university-based comprehensive services, research, and advocacy center for sex and labor trafficking survivors. We provide comprehensive services to both sex and labor trafficking survivors of all ages, nationalities, and genders. Our goal is restoring dignity and human rights to trafficking survivors through a client-centered, holistic services and support. We provide a full range of services on a bilingual basis: legal, social, and crisis intervention services, mental health and basic medical care, and education and employment assistance. Our services are located together, which gives our different service providers, attorneys, therapists, case managers, and our economic empowerment team, excuse me, the ability to meet together on a regular basis and coordinate on a client's case through a multidisciplinary approach. This approach gives us a full picture of the client's intersecting needs, and it enables us to prioritize and provide the best coordinated survivor-centered care. The University of Maryland makes this approach possible and is an ideal platform for our center. We have drawn upon the clinical and academic expertise of 10 University of Maryland undergraduate and professional schools, and this has enabled us to base our multidisciplinary services on evidence-based research and best practices, and to integrate a research and direct services perspective. And we've been so fortunate to have as a partner Dr. Nadine Finnegan-Carr at the University of Maryland School of Social Work, whom you've heard about several times already today, and you will hear about following me, who brings such expertise on child trafficking and adolescent risk. And we are also at the Safe Center training students so that a new generation of professionals are skilled to combat trafficking. And I'm so happy to say that a number of our students are already working in the field. A centerpiece of our work is our economic empowerment program, as a good, stable job is essential to independence, empowerment, and a true escape from trafficking. It is life-changing. To lead this program, we hired a corporate executive from Marriott who brought a business perspective, work development expertise, as well as experience with youth employability programs. There are three basic intertwined elements to our program: education and skills development, helping our clients to find steady employment, and employer engagement and partnership. Our economic empowerment team provides our clients with customized job search and job application support and one-on-one mentorship with industry professionals. Courtesy of funding from the Maryland Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services, and our corporate partners, we have provided our clients with laptops and computer training, which has been critical to enabling them to access our training programs and job application support online. As you can appreciate, this has been particularly essential during the pandemic when in-person services were not possible. Most of our clients had never previously had access to computers or even smartphones. We have provided our clients access to specialized university training programs such as tax preparation training and assistance through the university's School of Business, and an innovation online English language learning program. Our clients are now benefiting from our First Step into Employment program, which our staff specially designed to support young adults in gaining industry-specific employment skills. And we're so pleased that Marriott International and the Global Fund to End Modern Slavery have selected the SAFE Center to pilot with our clients their hospitality career readiness training program in advance of its worldwide rollout. In the nearly 5 years we've been operating, next week will be the 5th anniversary of our opening. We have served over 300 human trafficking victims and family members. Our clients are both American and foreign-born. The foreign-born are largely from Central America, Mexico, the Philippines, and African countries. 60% of our clients have been victims of sex trafficking, 32% labor trafficking, and the remainder were subject to both sex and labor trafficking. 90% of our clients are women and girls, and nearly 75% have been women and girls of color. This is in line with the experience of anti-trafficking service providers across the country that Black, Latina, and Asian American community members have been disproportionately victimized by traffickers. Indeed, racism is among the root causes of human trafficking, and the SAFE Center is actively working to ensure that pursuit of racial equity remains core to our programming, community partners, and advocacy. Our clients have also been among the most adversely affected by COVID. Sex and labor trafficking thrive on human misery and vulnerability, and isolation is a tactic used by traffickers to control their victims. While closure of public facilities has been necessary for public health during the pandemic, traffickers have taken advantage of the increased isolation, driving trafficking further underground and putting victims at even greater risk. During economic crises, traffickers prey on and seek to exploit those most desperate for income, shelter, food, housing, and security. The isolation and economic insecurity caused by COVID has increased our clients' vulnerability to homelessness, food insecurity, and re-exploitation. This is reflected in the fact that over the last year, we have seen a 50% increase in new clients and a dramatic increase in the range and intensities of the services needed. Nearly a third of our clients are labor trafficking survivors. Since labor trafficking is a seriously under-identified and under-investigated crime in Maryland and across the country, we and the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force work to secure passage of the Maryland law criminalizing labor trafficking. Enforcing this law and bringing labor trafficking victims out of the shadow is a major priority for the SAFE Center, and we are working together as part of the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force Labor Trafficking Committee to bring all the right people to the table to develop a coordinated effort. Labor trafficking is far more prevalent, but less understood than sex trafficking. Labor trafficking victims are forced to work against their will with little or no pay, often working inhumanely long hours, 7 days a week, under extreme and degrading conditions where they are deprived of adequate food, shelter, and healthcare. They are often subject to physical and sexual abuse, as well as surveillance and strict control. Labor trafficking is perpetrated in many extreme forms, including when youth are forced to engage in criminal activity, such as transporting drugs. A common tactic by traffickers is debt bondage, where they trick victims into incurring debt and use that debt to forcibly obtain labor. Labor trafficking is most prevalent in domestic work, agriculture, construction, and the hotel and restaurant sectors. Informed by our direct frontline experience serving human trafficking survivors, we are actively engaged in the community to create awareness and strengthen prevention efforts, working with our state and local task forces, healthcare providers, schools, our interfaith partners, and law enforcement and other service providers. You have heard from the earlier speakers about the importance of the Regional Navigator Program to preventing child sex trafficking and strengthening the social safety net for victims. The Safe Center is the regional navigator for youth in 2 of Maryland's most populous counties, and this is one of our core youth prevention programs. Our clinical behavioral health team is also conducting victim outreach and trafficking prevention efforts with a number of local high schools, including those attended by a large percentage of first-generation students from Latin American and African countries. Our team has conducted workshops with students, faculty, staff, and parents on human trafficking, healthy relationships, and the warning signs of exploitation. Our end goal is to empower teens to successfully navigate vulnerabilities and build individual, family, and community defenses against exploitation and trafficking. As you heard from Joe Baldwin, our task force chair, hospitals and medical providers can play a crucial role in prevention in improving the health of human trafficking victims and even saving lives. Healthcare providers may be the only professionals to have contact with sex trafficking survivors during their exploitation. And the research shows that a substantial majority of sex trafficking victims do have contact with hospitals during their exploitation. I am very proud of the leadership role that the center played in partnership with the Maryland Hospital Association and the task force in developing statewide guidelines to help hospital caregivers better identify and support trafficking survivors. The Safe Center has been actively involved in training hospitals and professionals since developing the guidelines, and hospitals have continued to request our assistance in training even under remote conditions during the pandemic. The intent of this program is straightforward. If healthcare providers are equipped with training and tools, people experiencing trafficking are more likely to view the hospital as a safe setting, and they're more likely to be identified and to be offered appropriate care. So I just like to conclude by emphasizing that the Safe Center could not do this important work without the collaboration of our task force and other partners in the community. We are grateful to the support of the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services, the Governor and the First Lady, our state and federal legislators, and the University of Maryland. Thank you again to First Ladies Yumi Hogan and Donna Edwards for shining a light on the scourge of human trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Esserman, for leading such a powerful and impactful program. Our next presenter is Susan B. Hansel, State Chapter Director for the Maryland Children's Alliance. Susan?
Thank you so much. And thank you to First Lady Hogan, First Lady Edwards, the Louisiana First Foundation, and to my colleagues at the Louisiana Alliance of Children's Advocacy Centers. As State Chapter Director of Maryland Children's Alliance, I have the privilege of working with 24 child advocacy centers across our state and with such people like Johanna and Marion. 17 of our centers are accredited by National Children's Alliance, and 7 emerging centers are on that pathway. We're very proud of the fact that in every jurisdiction across our state, a child victim and family can be assured of a trauma-informed approach to a concern or allegation of child sex abuse and child trafficking. But Maryland's Child Advocacy Center network is unique in the National Children's Alliance network because 79% of our centers are headquartered in law enforcement offices, departments of social services, or county offices. Unlike most states that work from nonprofits, we only have 3 nonprofit centers in Maryland. So while this presents some unique challenges for us, more importantly, it presents very strong collaborations. And as you've heard, child trafficking begins with that one child, often a preteen or adolescent, controlled, manipulated, forced, and threatened by trafficker to engage in a commercial sex act. They're part of a subculture within the child abuse and neglect environment, and they're disenfranchised socially from their peers. Local child advocacy centers in Maryland have worked with or on behalf of these victims for over 30 years. But now is the time, as the number of reports of child trafficking victimization increases in Maryland, to build the capacity and confidence of our center staff and their multidisciplinary team partners to ensure that every victim of child trafficking can survive their trauma and thrive beyond it. In August of 2018, Maryland Governor Hogan announced initiatives to combat human trafficking, including work on behalf of child victims. He declared that to ensure Maryland is identifying and providing services to child victims of human trafficking, the Child Advocacy Center Best Practices Work Group is researching and developing a protocol to identify and provide services to child human trafficking victims for child advocacy centers. And that last phrase was really important. This assigned group determined that because of that focus on child advocacy centers, we would use our National Children's Alliance Standards for Accredited Members as the basis for our work. And the work took a year of research, writing, editing, and design. And I want to thank our editing team that included representatives from the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services, the Maryland Department of Human Services, 2 of our Maryland-based child advocacy centers, and Maryland Children's Alliance. Once we got the manual, we began work in collaboration with the University of Maryland School of Social Work to create a training plan that we executed last year to ensure that our child advocacy centers, their multidisciplinary team partners, and our local human trafficking task force partners could access this work. Today's summit is another venue in order to share this information. And you've heard about the numbers. Through September of 2019, Maryland had 610 reports, now it's 679 reports. And we know that the majority of our centers have at least experienced one case of working with a victim of child trafficking. Most times our centers will provide forensic interviewing, victim advocacy support, and mental health services when there is a victim that comes to us. With an understanding that volumes could be written about how to apply each of the 10 national standards to cases of child trafficking, our focus in the manual was to highlight those differences that were most important and most universal between general child sex abuse and child trafficking cases. The format is meant to be similar to the national standards so that Child Advocacy Center staff and their multidisciplinary team partners already feel comfortable referring to it. References to the existing national standards are included in our manual in regular font, and the unique qualities of working with a victim of child trafficking are in italics. Each standard is written as an independent entity from the rest, with the assumption that the staff and MDT partners may just need to refer to a particular section. The victim advocate may just want to look at that section, the forensic interviewer at that specific section. So if you read all the standards from start to finish, which most people don't, there is some duplication of information, and that's done on purpose. So our 10 standards, our national standards, begin with the multidisciplinary team and go through the child-focused setting. Today, I'm going to focus on the first 6 standards, from the multidisciplinary team standard to the mental health standard. The last 4 standards are focused on the operational side of the work, and they're all equally important to ensuring that the experience of the Child Advocacy Center minimizes the re-victimization of the victim of child trafficking. So the first standard is the multidisciplinary team, which, as you've heard, is at the very core of the Child Advocacy Center model. Child advocacy centers have memos of understanding or interagency agreements with all of their multidisciplinary team partners, including Child Protective Services, local law enforcement, the state's attorney, medical and mental health professionals, and the CAC staff. When the child is a victim of trafficking, the MDT will often, but not always, expand to include, in Maryland, the Maryland State Police and/or federal partners. How the Child Advocacy Center and multidisciplinary team partners interact is covered in this interagency agreement, or MOU. So to be prepared for including these other partners in a multidisciplinary team meeting for a victim of child trafficking, it's vital that the center have already executed that memo of understanding with the additional partners. Now, National Children's Alliance has a national memo of understanding with the FBI, and accredited centers can opt into that agreement if they want to. But child advocacy centers, accredited or otherwise, can also create their own memo of understanding. And that's why the manual includes an example of one such local memo of understanding with the FBI, as well as the National Children's Alliance agreement. But the real value of the MOU or interagency agreement is the relationship that's built between the Child Advocacy Center, its existing multidisciplinary team partners, and the additional state and federal partners. So we encourage our child advocacy centers, before they have an identified victim, to invite representatives of these agencies to their center, give them a tour, virtually or in person, meet the staff, and share what it would look like if one of these federal partners or the state police needs to collaborate with the Child Advocacy Center. The FBI and Homeland Security might bring their own victim advocate to meet with the staff and to meet with the local victim advocate. The important thing here is that creating and enhancing these relationships before there is the emergency of a case will strengthen the outcomes for the child. When we think about the forensic interview standard, typically the Child Advocacy Center conducts just one forensic interview to gather all the pertinent information from the child with the multidisciplinary team partners observing in real time. But with a victim of child trafficking, it's recommended that the forensic interviewer hold multiple and extended interviews with the child or young adult. For victims of child trafficking, we've heard how trust is a huge issue, and it can take multiple meetings, hours, days, or even weeks to build sufficient trust for the victim to disclose the abuse. The manual talks about extended forensic interviews beginning on page 57. It's also important for the Child Advocacy Center to select a forensic interviewer who has experience with victims of child trafficking, and that same person and the center ensure there's a system of peer review to help constantly assess and improve those forensic skills. Now, we know that in Maryland, we have centers that are only seeing a few children or are smaller budgeted and more rural centers. And so we encourage our smaller and rural centers to regionalize perhaps meeting this forensic interview standard so that they can get a forensic interviewer with just the right experience to connect with that child. So when we talk about the role of the victim advocate in the Child Advocacy Center, it's such an important role for most of our kids. But the role when there is a victim of child trafficking may be completely different. For instance, if the federal partner's involved, they'll likely have their own advocate, and that person has taken the lead on the relationship with the child. That's okay. The CAC doesn't need to feel bad or hurt about this, because again, ahead of the case coming to the center, the Child Advocacy Center team has already met the federal investigator, knows their federal victim advocate as a partner, and has created a good working relationship with them. The local center victim advocate's role is vital to ensuring that local resources are available to both the federal partners and the child. And again, considering these qualities of trafficking cases ahead of their arrival at the Child Advocacy Center really develops better collaboration. You heard a little bit about medical procedures in these cases, and the medical standard typically involves a lot of discussion about how to assess the need for exams and the trainings and eligibility standards for medical professionals associated with the Child Advocacy Center. In our manual, we take a little bit different focus. We know that many victims of trafficking of all ages receive some medical help while they are being trafficked. So in this section of our manual, we discuss how the medical exam may be the only time when the victim is truly and completely separate from the alleged abuser or those associated with the alleged abuser, and therefore how the medical provider may have a unique opportunity to learn from the child and maybe even get a disclosure. We talk about how to consider safety issues for the medical staff when the victim is separated for treatment from those who brought them. The medical provider may be told that the people with the victim are relatives when in fact they're really part of the trafficking community. So it's important to make that separation clear. We also know that the child or teen may be reluctant to separate from their cell phone even during the medical exam, because that's the control between the victim and the person trafficking them. These are all issues that the medical team and the Child Advocacy Center need to work together on to maximize the potential for the victim to feel safe, as well as the medical professionals to feel safe. When the Child Advocacy Center thinks about mental health protocols for victims of trafficking, it's really important to consider having providers who are experienced and comfortable with complex trauma. It's not automatic that the Child Advocacy Center's current mental health provider for most child victims of sex abuse will be the one comfortable enough and have the most pertinent experience to work with a victim of child trafficking. As Joe talked about earlier, these are not the typical victims that we see at Child Advocacy Centers. These victims present with anger issues, with emotional walls built up to ensure their survival, and often don't even see themselves as victims. So it takes a mental health provider with special skills to work with these victims. Again, for child advocacy centers with smaller numbers of victims, we encourage you to explore with nearby jurisdictions, nearby nonprofits, to find the very best mental health provider for working with a victim of trafficking. The last four standards include case review, data, organizational capacity, and the center's child-focused setting. Considering how to adapt each of these standards plays a vital role in building a center's capacity and confidence in support of a child victim of trafficking. And I encourage you to take a moment to look at those pages of the manual. Victims of child trafficking have so many faces, and they come from all walks of life, from our urban areas, as well as the suburbs and rural communities, as you've heard today. They're children who have grown up way too fast just to survive. I think we often use the word vulnerable when we think of them, but they see themselves as survivors. And I read a quote that I want to share with you. "You can't put a price tag on a person. I'm worth more than just money. I'm worthy of love, honor, respect, and compassion. Child advocacy centers throughout Maryland are working to build their capacity and confidence to best support each child victim of sex trafficking, one child at a time, with love, honor, respect, and compassion. We're happy to share this information with you, and I want to thank you again for having us here today.
Thank you, Susan. Our last presenter is Dr. Nadine Finnegan-Carr, Director of the Prevention of Adolescent Risk Initiative at the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Social Work. Dr. Carr.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Thank you. Thank you so much, First Lady Yumi Hogan and First Lady of Louisiana, Donna Edwards, for having me. Thank you to all of the First Ladies present and to my colleagues from across Maryland, especially Director Farr at the Department of Human Services and Ambassador Esserman, as well as so many other of my colleagues. And welcome and thank you to my counterpart in Louisiana, my friend, Dr. Dana Hunter. I am Dr. Nadine Finnegan-Carr, and I am duly appointed faculty in the Schools of Social Work and Medicine at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. My specific role is as Deputy Director of the Ruth Young Center for Maryland, as First Lady Hogan mentioned. I will be providing some data about the issue of human trafficking, specifically child sex trafficking here in Maryland, as well as the work that my team, the Prevention of Adolescent Risks Initiative, has been doing in collaboration with many on this call to prevent child sex trafficking and assist the state of Maryland for building the infrastructure to address this important issue. Geographically, Maryland is uniquely situated to be a hotspot for human sex trafficking. Its central location has facilitated its development as both what we call a pass-through state and a destination location for human traffickers. Many of our highways, especially Interstate 95, are used to connect victims to many East Coast cities, such as New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. Specifically, Interstate 95 runs through some of the state's most populated communities, providing an easily accessible thoroughfare for human traffickers. My colleagues from Washington and Cecil counties described some of the issues specific to their areas, which have high number of reports for our state. Baltimore City and Baltimore County, known as the Baltimore metropolitan area, currently have the highest and have the clustered hottest spots on the heat map before you. Major highways also provide, besides the actual travel, they provide numerous rest stops, truck stops, and bus stations, which have proven to be a primary location, I am sorry, for traffickers to exploit their victims. In addition, there are 3 major bus terminals in the Baltimore-Washington metropolitan area. Airports like the Thurgood Marshall Baltimore-Washington International Airport serve as important entry points for traffickers and victims into Maryland. They also serve as a breeding ground because traffickers know that Johns who travel to Maryland for brief meetings and conferences will engage in illicit sexual activity more readily because of the anonymity of the experience in new locations. Law enforcement has investigated numerous cases of human trafficking in all of these locations and in hotels surrounding them. In 2014, Maryland was ranked as the 8th highest state for human trafficking reports. Today, in 2021, we are still in the top 20 list at number 17. It is our hope by working collaboratively to work ourselves into not being on the list at all, because we aim to eradicate human trafficking in our state. Now, child sex trafficking, just to give you some understanding and some grounding, occurs when a victim is 17 or under, when an individual is involved in a commercial sex act, regardless of whether the age of consent, of what the age of consent is. And a commercial sex act is defined as a sexual activity where anything of value is given to or received by any person. And that item of value does not have to be cash or money. As Mr. Piercy was saying, these traffickers prey on the vulnerabilities of what the youth needs. And so this could include valuable commodities like shelter or food or clothing, drugs, an iPhone, or even transportation. It is this commercial aspect that differentiates child sex trafficking from other forms of child sexual abuse, such as sexual assault, rape, or molestation crimes, where there is no commercial element. Minors involved in commercial sex are trafficking victims, regardless of their stated willingness to prostitute or choice to get into the game. Federal law recognizes children under 18 may not have the capacity, the emotional or cognitive capacity to decide to engage in commercial sex. Youth are vulnerable to exploitation precisely because of their young age and their developmental stage. So exploitation can occur between a child and a customer, the pimp or trafficker, or anyone else who is profiting from the child's sexual activity. Youth under the age of 18 involved in what is referred to as survival sex, who do not have a trafficker, are still victims of trafficking. Now, in 2012, Maryland updated the Child Abuse Code, and that's important to note that that predates the federal changes of 2014. So in 2012, Maryland updated the Child Abuse Code and included trafficking under the definition of sexual abuse, which opened the door for minor victims to receive a child welfare rather than a juvenile justice response. This change also required mandated reporters to report any suspected cases of children involved in commercial sex, just the same way they would be required to report any other type of sexual, physical, or neglect of a child. In April 2017, the Protecting Victims of Sex Trafficking Act was passed in our state, which further delineated this code so that a child could be seen as a victim of trafficking, even if the perpetrator was not a parent or guardian, and even in cases where the trafficker may not be easily identified. My team and I worked with the state legislature, as well as many on this call, to have this passed, and we applaud Governor Hogan for signing it into law. Now, on the left here, you will see the overall incidence of trafficking in our state, including adults. As you see, sex trafficking is our primary mode of trafficking for our state. However, we also have incidents where sex and labor trafficking coexist together. On the right, you will see references to some of the reports specific to child sex trafficking. Now, this particular graph is through September of 2019 and does not include some of the numbers that were shared earlier, which go through May 2020. I will get into a little bit of those later. But this particular graph I wanted to share because it shows all of the jurisdictions in our state and the fact that at least one case has been identified in every jurisdiction in the state of Maryland throughout the past few years. Now, of these reports, most of them have been, as Director Farr mentioned, not all of them became identified reports, but some of them also were multiple reports of the same child. And we know that even when it looks like there may be 0 or 1, that there may be more youth that have been identified, because what also happens is a youth may be trafficked from one jurisdiction into another jurisdiction, which is why it is very important for our Regional Navigator program to exist, because they are able to provide supports regardless of where the child shows up. Now, in Maryland, this is more specific to what we were sharing earlier. Over 679 reports of suspected child sex trafficking were screened in, as mentioned. Of those reports, law enforcement was the largest referral source, and they identified over 30% of these cases. Like national child welfare data, most victims involved in Maryland's reports were aged 14 to 17. However, some of them have been younger, unfortunately, as young as 9 and 8 years old. Those are easier to identify because everyone wants to support them than some of the older ones who present as wanting to get in the game, even though we know that they were coerced as well. Now, the identified victims predominantly resided in our state of Maryland, although of this number, over 20 victims from other states were trafficked into Maryland. 70% of our confirmed victims had prior involvement with the child welfare system before their first sex trafficking report, and 50% of them had involvement in the year immediately preceding that report, which is why our partnership with the Department of Human Services and the Department of Juvenile Services is so important, because these are the areas, as Mr. Piercy was mentioning, where our traffickers are looking to exploit victims. Now, what is prevention, and why is it that I focus primarily on prevention of this problem? So an understanding of this led me to work with colleagues across the country to develop what we refer to as a traumagenic model for addressing the issue of child sex trafficking. Because what we realized is, like many of the people who have spoken earlier, this issue is multidisciplinary, and we have to work at multiple levels in order to address it. It's receiving a great deal of attention, and so we needed to continue to build the evidence base to address this issue. Therefore, we saw the need for this theoretical framework that provides direction on how best to intervene and conduct research into this phenomenon. This was published in December of 2018 in the Journal of Child and Adolescent Social Work, and is available for anyone if you search for traumagenic model and child sex trafficking in that journal. Now, this model examines not just the impact of trafficking on victims' psychological functioning due to abuse, stigmatization, traumatic sexualization, and feelings of powerlessness, but it also considers an ecological explanatory framework that examines their behavior, the behaviors, lifestyles, and environmental factors across their environment that lead to them being trafficked. So it looks at how their personal history and the environment interact to lead to them being trafficked. And it utilizes a 4-tier approach similar to that posited by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to address the issue of violence. It focuses on how factors at each level interact and contribute to youth vulnerability for sex trafficking. We've heard of some of them, but what I really wanted us to understand is we have to move beyond individualistic explanations of why sex trafficking occurs to them, and consider all of the complex relationships between the personal, the interpersonal, and our societal factors which contribute to vulnerability for trafficking. So this model explores how trafficking could be related to not only the victim's personal history, so being a victim of child abuse or neglect, but also by factors related to their relationship with the potential trafficker. So their vulnerability to manipulation by what we refer to as a Romeo who comes in and romances them. Their relationships to the community, maybe lack of positive social support or limited financial opportunities, and also their relationship to the larger society, which may stigmatize or blame them for their own situation. This framework we've been using here in Maryland to identify and cluster our intervention strategies based on the different level. And as you heard different people who spoke from different levels, this is how we've been doing and conducting our work here in Maryland over the past decade. So specifically prevention, when we refer to prevention, and you put the academic last, so I'm sorry. But when we refer to prevention, we talk about 3 levels. And those 3 levels are defined by the interventions that we use to inhibit or reduce the effects of a given threat, such as commercial sex or labor exploitation. The interventions are applied prior to or at various periods during exposure to the threat. So the primary stage of prevention is what we're trying to get to, and that seeks to avert the injury before it even occurs. Many of us right now are working at the secondary stage, but we really also are working at preventing abuse or exploitation before it ever occurs. So that includes classroom education for students, awareness campaigns, targeting parents, and general public awareness campaigns. The secondary stage seeks to minimize the impact of injury on those that have already been impacted. So these interventions may include efforts to increase early identification of victims, such as billboards or PSA awareness campaigns, education, professional trainings. And the tertiary stage of prevention seeks long-term solutions, and that's what we really need, are long-term solutions to help restore or comfort those that have been severely injured. This is the stage of last resort when someone's already been trafficked. Since the human and financial cost of mental and physical health care at this point can become burdensome and less effective, we really want to get to the primary and prevent it before they get to this point. So while prevention is one of the main tenets of Maryland's Trafficking Victims Protection Act, what we're doing right now is focusing a lot on the secondary and tertiary, and we really eventually want to get to a lot more primary. So our primary efforts right now are focused at the societal and community levels of the traumagenic model that I shared. They have included infographics, such as the one that you see on this screen that are available on our website, and a series of billboards that have occurred both in Baltimore City, as well as in Howard and Prince George's County, as well as some of the billboards that were mentioned that have occurred in Cecil County by my colleagues on the Regional Navigator Committee. At the secondary prevention level, as awareness of the nature and scope of the issue has grown, child welfare agencies, our child welfare agency specifically, has developed and implemented training for the social service workforce. We worked with them from 2014 to 2019 to develop the training, implement it, ensure that every child welfare worker in our state was trained. And now that training is a part of the onboarding for every child welfare worker when they become a part of our Department of Human Services, Social Services Administration. They must take this training within the first 2 years of them becoming a part of that workforce so that we can continue to ensure that our child welfare workers are front line when it comes to identifying and supporting youth that are victims of child sex trafficking in our state. This allows us to provide comprehensive case management services to this vulnerable population of youth, which is very imperative. And in addition to training social workers who work for child welfare and those throughout the state who work for various child serving agencies, we have also provided training for law enforcement, mental health and medical professionals, lawyers, judges, and magistrates, as well as the general public. The training for mental health clinicians that we have developed in collaboration with the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force Victim Services Committee and the establishment of the Clinicians Collaborative discussed by Joe Baldwin earlier is a part of this work. Many of these trainings have been developed with funding from both the Children's Bureau and the Department of Justice's Office for Victims of Crime. We also work with DJS, DHS, and many of our partners to provide training and technical assistance for the Regional Navigators program mentioned by Glenn Fuston and the presenters from the Maryland Regional Navigators projects in Cecil and Washington County. We also work directly with the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force, the Victim Services Subcommittee, and the Maryland Medical Subcommittee to build capacity for victim services organizations to work directly with child and youth victims. This has included some funding for a few of the victim services organizations directly, as well as the Mental Health Clinicians Collaborative. We've also been working with doctors, hospitals, and clinics to advise them on how best to respond when they suspect that trafficking has occurred. This slide shows an example of an algorithm which can be implemented, and I chose to use an example from Utah so that it would be more applicable for other states since I knew there would be numerous states on the board. A similar algorithm was shared in the Cecil County presentation for how they do it within their county. This particular algorithm shows how, when a youth presents in an emergency room, what some of the steps could be. Hospitals throughout the state here have signed on to develop their own versions of this via the SERVE training model that Joe Baldwin mentioned. And this really is something that can be put in place very quickly by hospitals, and so that you can respond if you to youth, because as was mentioned, a number of youth present to hospitals and clinics and doctors throughout the course of their time being trafficked. In our last count, 85% of youth were seen by some sort of medical professional in the year prior to them being identified. And that is something that if we had more outreach among our medical professionals, which we are doing right now, we're actually working with the Maryland American Academy of Pediatrics to train all pediatricians and allied health professionals in our state, so that we can improve the number of doctors and medical professionals that identify these youth before it even gets to a further point. So thank you again for having me. And I look forward to continued collaborations with my colleagues and with the governor's office and with First Lady Yumi Hogan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Finnegan Carr, and thanks to all of this morning's rock star speakers and presenters. At this time, I'd like to turn it back over to our dedicated leader who we're so proud of, First Lady Donna Edwards.
Okay, help me out, Sarah. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, great. Sorry, I had a little low on my earbuds there. So I just want to thank everybody. I know we went over this morning, and I want to thank First Lady Hogan and our staff and each of the speakers and panelists for such a great presentation and for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. Really another great summit, and we're so appreciative. Thank you to each of the first spouses who were able to join us and your leadership, because it does matter. Leveraging this leadership role is important. I also want to thank Monsignor Serrando from the Vatican, who was joining us today. It's a little late there, so thank you for that. I saw in the chat box where former Congressman Ted Poe was also part of today's event. He's done amazing work in human sex trafficking, and I'm just grateful for him. Thank you to Dana Hunter, who introduced our speakers. Dana was appointed in 2017 as Louisiana's Governor John Bel Edwards, Executive Director of Governor's Office Children's Cabinet. She works closely with Governor Edwards and my team to facilitate statewide anti-human sex trafficking efforts and the Human Trafficking Prevention Commission. She has done an amazing job and has become an integral part of our team. So thank you so much, Dr. Hunter. I also want to say thank you to our U.S. Department of Justice officials and other national, state, and international leaders who are on here with us. Your leadership guides us on this issue, and it's so important. And thank you to our over 400 participants who joined us. Please feel free to invite your colleagues who work in this field to join our next summit. The more we are connected, the more we share, the more information we understand, the more of an impact we will have collectively on eradicating human trafficking. And I'd also like to thank Andrea Sparks from Governor Abbott's child sex trafficking team, Suku from First Lady Hogan's office, Delary Rice from my office, my assistant Kayla, and Katie with Louisiana Fosters. They worked tirelessly to make this come together. So thank you. If your state is interested in presenting at one of our future summits, please contact Delary Rice. Her email is posted in the chat, along with a link to survey, social media accounts, and other good information. Just also, there's a Mid-South Trafficking Summit in Lake Charles on June 13th to the 14th. If you're interested in more information about this summit that will take place, the link for the registration is in the chat box. Also a PDF of to fill out. So please look for that. And if you need more information, contact Delary, of course. And finally, I'd like to announce that our National Coalition Against Human Trafficking has been formed. And this formalized group sprang from these summits and will allow us to connect on a national level and further support our efforts to collaborate. We're in the process of reaching out to other first spouses to join us and continuing this collaboration to end this crime. Louisiana will host the first event for the National Coalition in 2022, and we will share more information with you on the next summit. If in my staff or the speakers or any of us can assist you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our follow-up email will include a link to a recording of the summit and links to all the resources that were mentioned today. Please visit our website, louisianafirstfoundation.com, to view our online resources and information about all the past summits. I look forward to seeing you all at our next summit in October. Please look for announcements through your email about the date and how to register. Thanks again to Marilyn and First Lady Hogan and all those involved in today's summit. God bless each and every one of you, and have a safe and healthy day. God bless. Thank you. Thank you, Susan, First Lady Hutchinson. Thank you so much, Donna.